Helen stood by the harbor, her easel leaning against a crate. She loved painting dawn over the water, the pale light slicing through mist, the gulls wheeling above the masts. But in the town, the upcoming art fair belonged to Soren, the muralist whose colors roared like thunder across a wall. People whispered that, to win the prize, Helen would have to paint with Soren's bravery, to be loud and dazzling. Helen tried to copy the big strokes, mixing bold oranges and furious blues, but the faces in her canvas looked uneasy. The harbor beneath felt borrowed, and every stroke reminded her of a mask she did not want to wear. Lena, Helen's grandmother, visited the studio with a basket of herbs and a quiet smile. She sat by the easel and watched the canvas breathe for a moment before speaking. "Be true to yourself," she said, "not a copy of someone else. Your voice is a thread that holds this town together." The old woman told a story of her own youth, when she painted windows of her small house with patient, careful lines rather than grand bravura. She entrusted Helen with a bundle of brushes that had belonged to Helen's mother, who had painted the harbor in gentle tones before she fell ill. "Use them," Lena said, "to listen to your own heart." That night, Helen lay awake, listening to the tide and the creak of the wharf. She tried to imitate the thunder of Soren, but the colors burned and then leaked away. Then she picked up the old brushes and let her heart speak. She painted the harbor as she had always seen it in the quiet mornings. Pale blues, a ribbon of rose light along the water line, subtle shadows in the boats, a single gull circling above. The scene felt like a memory she could hold in her hands, nothing flashy, yet true. The next day, the fair arrived. The square hummed with music, pennants, and the shimmer of wet paint. Soren unveiled a wall-sized mural that charged the air with bright, dramatic energies. People clapped at first, but as they moved closer to Helen, something else happened. Her painting stood apart, not loud but honest. Those who paused let their eyes sink into the pale harbor and then rise with a memory they recognized as their own. An old fisherman who rarely spoke stood in front of her canvas, tracing the soft lines with a weathered finger, and tears gathered in his eyes. A child tugged at his sleeve and whispered that the harbor looked like home. Nico, Helen's friend and neighbor, stood near the lane opposite the stage, holding a cup of tea and smiling. He did not pretend to be impressed by noise. He believed in the slower truth that Helen had found. When the judges approached, they asked her to tell what she had painted, and she spoke simply about listening to the harbor, as if listening to a friend. The crowd grew quiet, then nodded, as if a truth they had always known but never named had finally found its way out of the canvas. When the prize announcements came, Soren was praised for his bold command of color, and Helen received a smaller award for most honest vision. The ribbon felt light on her coat, and heavier with meaning at the same time. People crowded around and spoke of how the harbor on her canvas did not shout, but it asked a question and then answered it with its own quiet, steady breaths. Helen realized the true reward was not a large trophy, but a new sense of belonging to a voice that could be trusted and heard. That night, she stood on the quay with Lena and Nico, the painting wrapped in cloth, listening to the waves. The sea spoke in a language she nearly understood, telling her that the most lasting color comes from the truth inside. Be true to yourself, whispered Lena, and the world will hear the sound of your own heart. Helen smiled for the first time that day, content that her work would carry a memory that was hers alone, and that was enough. From then on, she painted not to win the crowd, but to honor the voice within, and the town learned to listen. The moral glowed in her studio stillness. Be true to yourself, for your own honest color is the thread that will tie your world together.